The Elgin Valley people might not know, but my dad's students, if there are any here, you know how my dad can be. He's very rambly, so I think I picked that up from him. But I did feel like that I wanted to thank a few people because this is definitely a work of the Lord. Everything that's been happening since my dad's been in the hospital and what's happened since then, God has been working in so many ways to pull things together and to make it a real growing experience for all of us. And so I think, especially the Elgin Valley family, the pastors, everyone who came by, or who was able to come by when my dad was at home or in the hospital, it means so much to us to see the outpouring of love that came from especially our Elgin Valley family, but also for the church that I work at, my Salem Fork family. Those of you who are here, I appreciate you guys as well. Members of the community, friends. There's just so many people, the people who helped to set up the room back there and all the food, and all the people I forgot because my brain's not working that well. What I wanted to do is I wanted to mention, I want to talk about some things about my dad that maybe you didn't know because he had such a large sphere of influence in so many different people. I want to mention a few things that maybe you didn't know about him. If you're a student or if you went to Elgin Valley, you might not know certain things. So I wanted to share some things that we found, some memories that we found very special about my dad. The first thing that I thought of, and I'm going to try not to go too long, but you never know, right? Is that I remember when we were younger, at Easter time, my dad would always go to his work and he'd set up all the Easter eggs, hundreds of Easter eggs at his lab right over there. And he'd set up all the Easter eggs and he had little maps of where all the eggs were and we'd go and hunt. What? Yeah. And he gave me a special, I don't know why, but he set a special area for me up in the attic, which the other kids didn't like to go. So it was just my area up in the attic where I got to search for eggs all by myself, and it was kind of scary up there for the rest of it. But I was okay with that. And I just thought that was really special that he was willing to put all the time and effort into that. And as a father, it was very special that he would always read to us every night. Even as we got into middle school and high school, I think he still read to you guys, right?
12 or 13 before he stopped, yeah.
Yeah. So that was he would always make up different voices for characters in the books, and it was really sweet of him to do that. He also helped us out. He helped a lot of times. There were times where we didn't learn. Maybe it was several years before we learned things because he just liked to do stuff for us and not tell us, but especially with car stuff. One thing that I found very special is that he always made a point to make a very special connection with each of his kids. With David, they bonded on sports and football and comics as well, beautiful comics, and video games, playing video games with David. With me, it was more about hiking and the music stuff and our corny jokes that we'd share on Facebook or on our text messages. With Hannah, she'll talk about this. It was a lot about Hannah shares Dad's love of animals, and that transitioned into kind of medical stuff. So they talked about medical stuff when Hannah was around, and also about the sports and the comics as well. And with Amy, a lot of it was about their shows that they'd watched together, like the Breaking Bad and Walking Dead and the Die Hard. My dad loved Die Hard. And so he made a point to make a special connection with all of us in that way. And it's very special. We spent a lot of time in his work, surprisingly. You'd think for it being a diagnostic laboratory for animals that it wouldn't be a place for kids, but we spent so much time there rolling around on chairs in the hallways. Yeah, we rode our bikes in his lab. And we played hide and seek in the lab, sometimes while there was work going on. And one time he brought us into the necropsy lab, there's this big metal table that can raise up really high where you put the animals on. And we had a video game system that was a projector. And he raised the necropsy table like 12 feet off the ground, and we played video games off the projector on the back wall. Yeah, you weren't there. I think it was just David and I. So let me kind of push on because I haven't even gotten to the first page yet. He loved taking us to camp and being a counselor. I don't know how he did it with 20-something kids, but I don't know. He just loved being at camp. As well as reading to us, he also made our lunch. We also made our lunches that we took, especially Amy, all the way through high school.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. He made Amy's lunch and he'd write us little special notes. You think that's more of a mom thing to do, but that's how Dad served us.
Mom did it too.
Mom did it too, yeah.
I started it.
That's how a lot of things are with us. That Mom started and Dad's like, okay.
I took it away.
Oh yeah, I want to do that now. He'd also bring us to school sometimes in his slidey van, which is his work van that had no back seats. And I know it's illegal, but I'm kind of. And we kind of surf in the back of his van. You'll ask Amy about a special story. I don't have time for that story. Amy had a special time one day with that. He always loved to play in the leaves with us. He'd be raking the leaves, and we'd sit where they put the leaves. He'd get a big old sheet of leaves, and he'd just pour them right on us, and we'd play football and different games in the leaves. And one of the most special things in the last few years is when we, especially with my mom's help, we reconnected my dad with his sister, his one remaining sister out of the three. And we took a hike right after she got here, I think. And it was just a blessing to me to hear him and his sister talk about the good old days and his childhood, a lot of stories that I didn't know. And he got a perspective on his life that I hadn't seen from anyone else. So I thought that was really neat. He'd always help us with stuff like a science fair projects, of course, being the scientist. And all the times we had to move, he was always there to help us move our stuff. And then Annie moving to different apartments, and David moving in and out, and all the times I moved in and out of Appalachian. He was always there to help, and those little things mean a lot. Not only was he an excellent and amazing father in many ways, but I want to briefly talk about his relationship with my mom. I'll tell you, they're so sweet together. Almost sickeningly at times. Being a child, you understand, right?
Thank you for that.
They have a little sign above their room that says Lover's Lane. We didn't think anything about it when we were kids because that was our normal. But when other people would come by, we'd be like, what's that? Don't worry about it. It's our mom and dad.
Don't go in there.
But Dad's way of serving Mom, I mean, there were many things that he did, but we always think about him making coffee. Him making coffee for Mom every morning. And yeah, he didn't drink coffee, but he made it. And Mom kind of got to reciprocate that a little later on. The hot chocolate the coffee became Mom making hot chocolate for Dad. And they had a little thing together. It was really sweet. And so, in many ways, Dad, they both kind of work together to take care of each other. Especially when Mom had such a hard time with migraines daily or weekly, several days in a row, and trying to find the right amount of, trying to find the right medicine that would help her. And there's so many bad side effects that Dad had to really step up and help her a lot. And you can see how that relationship was reciprocated when Dad started getting sick. And it was Mom that was with him all the time. 36 days in the hospital, probably months if you add them all together. Never left his side. You see how they both worked together so well. And then, he worked as a veterinary diagnostician for many years, but I think what he really loved to do most was teaching. Not just in community colleges, but teaching anatomy and physiology, but he also taught us, and he taught kids. And I think he loved teaching more than anything else. I mentioned him being kind of rambly, but he was all, and we saw that when we look at his rating by professors, we see a lot of people say, oh, he's really rambly, but he loved his stories, and how he was also very kind to his students. And I could tell when I was around them that he had a very special relationship with his students. So if you're one of his students, I think I saw a few maybe, feel free to come tell us stories that you have about my dad that maybe we don't know, because we didn't get to see a lot of his student relationships. I lost my place. Yeah. Oh, this is an inside joke for the students who are here. His slogan was always, he always said that he wrote it on the board the first day. I don't know if he really did, but he always said, "Cake is good." And that was his kind of class slogan. I don't know if it really was, but you'll have to let us know. That's what he always said.
He would bring them cake.
But he'd always bring books and animals to our classrooms when we were in elementary school. What?
Chickens are the only ones.
Oh yeah, chickens aren't the only ones. So a book about chickens. He would bring that and he'd read it to our classes in elementary school. He'd bring our cats sometimes and talk about how to take care of your pets. So he wasn't just teaching adults, he also came and taught our elementary school classes, which was really sweet. And I know he taught us many things, but toward the end when he was getting more sick, he asked me to help him with stuff around the house that he wouldn't have asked me to before because he actually needed to. So it's because of that experience that I got to help him, and we got to bond over plumbing, over yard work, and raking, and we did a lot of snow shoveling together. We went to disassemble the lawnmower that wasn't working. We got that fixed. Those little moments, like helping with the painting, all that little stuff, that really adds up. That maybe we wouldn't have done together if it weren't for his needing someone to help him out. But some other interests that you might not know. Well, you probably know that he loved hiking, being outdoors. We had lots of fun experience, lots of stories of us hiking in the rain, in the snow, all weather, all different types of weather. But as you know, he loved music too, listening and performing. He was actually a really good whistler. I don't know if you guys know that. I was always kind of envious of his ability to whistle and the tone that he had, kind of strangely enough. But he also loved to sing. As you know, he sang in the choir for many years, as long as he could until it was hard on his voice to sing from all the chemo. If you go look in our basement, you'd see that he has tons of records from probably the 60s and 70s. He collected a lot of records. Kind of easy listening, country kind of music. That was his favorite. And you heard some of it beforehand. And there we'll play some of his favorite music as well. He also wanted to play the clarinet. You guys know that? He always kind of wanted to learn clarinet. And so I was able to teach him a couple notes when I brought my clarinet home from college. And I think he really enjoyed that. But in his family, Christmas music was so important. They got to, his family got bonded really over Christmas music. So he would always start singing Christmas music, probably, actually all year long. But I think the radios started playing Christmas music right after Thanksgiving for him. Because he was playing Christmas music all the time, and he loved it. He loved things like the Far Side comics, which is the little comics with the animals, and that's part of his cheesy sense of humor. Of course, about football, as many of you know, NC State football, Panthers. David wanted me to mention the times that he went to football games with my dad, and how they enjoyed that time together. We'd have a special little ritual on Sundays when they weren't able to go to games. Dad would make hamburgers, and Dad and David did this little thing in touchdowns, where they'd get up and run around the house and give each other high fives. Besides that, he actually was really into sports, especially when he was younger. He played volleyball in college some. He refereed for softball. I don't know when that was, but it's probably young adult-ish.
Yes.
Dad and I played Frisbee a lot outside.
Bowling.
What?
Bowling.
Bowling, I forgot about bowling. Yeah, he was a really good bowler, way better than...
He liked Wii bowling too.
And pool, loved pool. He did track in high school. He ran the hurdles, and he tried to teach me hurdles one time, but I couldn't. I'm not meant for that kind of jumping, I guess. And he loved to swim as well, and football. He played football in high school. There's probably more, but yeah. We had a really interesting thing that we did for him one of his birthdays. He loved crazy socks. And so for one of his birthdays, we decided that all of us were going to give him some crazy socks for his birthday. So I have some of his socks on today. I don't know if you can see them. Hannah doesn't have them on, but oh well. I have some cool shark socks on. If you want to see them up close, let me know. But yeah, he loved crazy socks. And I heard he even traded with people at the chemo place. Yeah, his chemo nurse, they would trade crazy socks. Besides that, he had of course I told you he had his shows. He likes the sci-fi kind of shows, superheroes. He loved Jeopardy. We used to watch Jeopardy almost every night. And even when he was in the hospital, he asked about how the current champion was doing. And then when David wanted me to mention, we'd always go to the Star Wars movies together. And he was so funny. Whenever anything exciting came on the screen, he would audibly just, whoa. And he'd look at us and go, whoa.
That is
He was actually a really good actor too. He didn't get an opportunity to do that much, but he did when he got to be in children's things and help with children. He got to show his acting skills. But I think he actually, in some little way, actually wanted to be an actor in a way. Maybe not full time, but he loved acting. As far as animals go, Hannah will talk about that, but he collected roosters, little rooster figurines that were all over his office, and chickens and all that kind of stuff. Another thing that he really loved, surprisingly, well maybe not surprisingly, is Disney. We went to Disney World a few years ago, and he was just like a kid in a candy store at Disney. He wanted to go to all the rides, and I remember trying to follow him around. And here he's fast walking around Disney World, and I'm trying to catch up to him. And I'm a high schooler, so I should have a lot of energy, but I couldn't even match his speed. That just shows the kind of kid he was at heart. He sent me this Facebook message several years ago. It's a quote that is printed on the board outside, but I'll give you the whole thing. It's just I don't know the context or anything, but he said to me, "You know your dad is still a kid at heart, and you can't ruin the magic that life throws at you." And I thought that's a really good indication of who my dad is in his personal life. I'm almost done, I think. But there is just so much to talk about. Spiritually, he grew up in a really tough environment. His family wasn't, there wasn't a lot of cohesion in his family. His dad was gone a lot. His mom was trying to hold things together for them, and it was tough on her. And he had a good relationship with his sisters, but they didn't really grow up in church. And it wasn't really until he met my mom that they started going to church together, and it was through the influence of my mom that my dad came to Christ. And he wanted to know so much about how to be a Christian man and husband. And I mean, he really achieved that. But we could tell that it was from that moment in his 20s, or maybe it was his 30s, right before they got married, that he decided, okay, now I'm going to really live for Christ. And so he jumped in head first, and never stopped growing. A couple passages that he'd always quote to us all the time. He struggled with a lot of fear issues and sometimes had panic attacks. But he said what got him through those times were, God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. He'd also say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. There's a couple, I'll just give you the quote, I guess. I can't really give you the context, but he would say, among other things, I remember him saying, I'm the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. I'm more than a conqueror. I'm the head, not the tail, above only, not beneath. Greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. Among many things. He had a thing that he got, that it was a list from his little congregation that they gave him, that he recited a lot. And I remember him saying those to us when we were going through tough times too. A couple small things to finish out my section. He loved his treats, orange slices, cherry pies, Swedish fish, black licorice. And in the hospital, it was kind of silly. he had a breathing tube in, so he couldn't talk. And so we were trying to figure out, because he wanted to say something to us. And so we were letting him draw letters on our hands, trying to figure out what he wanted to say. And weirdly enough, what he was spelling out in our hands, we figured out for a while, was black licorice. Which you might think it's because he wanted that, but it's actually, I think it was because something about the tube being in kind of tasted like black licorice.
Oh, I think he felt like it was.
Yeah. But he really, in the midst of all the terrible times in the hospital, he always had such a positive and fun attitude. He always tried to make jokes with the nurses and with people who came in. But if you didn't know, maybe the Elkin Valley people might know, he's actually more of an introvert than you might think. He definitely had an outward personality when he was teaching, but yeah, he was very much an introvert in many ways. It's really funny. He's very smart and educated. Like he has he has a doctorate, but how he's still talking. He always typed like this. I mean, I'm sure he learned typing at some point, but he always insisted on typing with 2 fingers. And he relied on us a lot to teach him about technology, trying to get him into using a smartphone, and eventually we got him an iPad. We had to teach him how to use that too. Every little moment is special, especially when Dad is asking people for when he needs help, which there was plenty of those times. One thing about my dad, I think Steve already mentioned, is that he was very much a fighter in many ways. It was one of the most, it could sometimes come across as stubbornness. Many people who know him, he was stubborn at times. But I think one of the most important lessons he had to learn in the last few months of his life was to be willing to ask people for help and to be willing to in some ways, give up the fight. Fighting can be good in many cases, but in Dad's case, in some areas, he needed to learn that I have to let people help me and ask for help. And so when at the very end, I believe when in his last few moments, that was him learning that lesson. I have to give it up, and in some ways, I have to give it up to Jesus. And I think that was the lesson that ushered him into perfection and being with Christ. And so I learned many things from my dad, just in closing for me. How to be a servant leader. He was, I think, the picture perfect example of a servant who was also a leader. He taught me how to have fun and love life and be silly and not take things too seriously sometimes. How to ask for help instead of just taking everything in on myself, and how to give it all for your family. And so Hannah has a few more memories from her perspective.